Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked through the entrance of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder and determination etched across her face. The California morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete walkways as she made her way toward the main administrative building. After 6 grueling months of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, she had earned her place among the most elite warriors in the United States military. Yet the looks she received from passing personnel suggested that not everyone was ready to accept this reality. Sarah had grown up in a small farming town in Iowa, where her father ran a struggling corn farm and her mother worked double shifts at the local diner. From an early age, she had learned that respect was something you earned through hard work and perseverance, not something given freely. When other girls her age were playing with dolls or experimenting with makeup, Sarah was helping her father repair farm equipment and learning to handle tools that were twice her size. Her hands, even now, bore the calluses and small scars that spoke of years spent working alongside machinery and livestock. The decision to join the Navy had come during her senior year of high school, when a military recruiter visited their small town. While her classmates planned college parties and summer vacations, Sarah found herself drawn to the recruiter's stories of purpose, brotherhood, and the chance to serve something greater than herself. Her parents had been skeptical at first, especially her mother, who worried about sending her only daughter into what had traditionally been a man's world. But Sarah's mind was made up, and once she set her sights on something, she rarely wavered. Boot camp had been challenging but manageable. Sarah's farm background had given her a physical toughness that many of her fellow recruits lacked. She could wake up before dawn without complaint, work through exhaustion, and push her body beyond what seemed possible. Her drill instructors noticed her potential early on, and it was one of them who first suggested she consider applying for SEAL training. The idea seemed almost impossible at the time, as women had only recently been allowed to attempt the program, and the success rate was notoriously low even for male candidates. The application process had been extensive, involving psychological evaluations, physical fitness tests that pushed her to her absolute limits, and interviews that seemed designed to break down her resolve. Sarah remembered one particular session where a panel of officers questioned her motivations for wanting to join such an elite unit. They asked pointed questions about her ability to kill if necessary, her willingness to sacrifice herself for her teammates, and whether she truly understood the psychological toll that special operations could take on a person. And the doors of a father-teacher were serious about it. Sirius had met someone from the teacher were serious about history. Throughout the interview came and told everything that there was no history. They discovered the teacher disqualify her. She learned to present herself with quiet confidence, answering every question directly and honestly while demonstrating the mental toughness that had carried her through every challenge she had faced in her young life. When the acceptance letter arrived, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and trepidation. She knew that the real test was just beginning, and that BUD/S training would push her far beyond anything she had experienced before. The statistics were daunting. Roughly 80% of candidates who entered the program would not complete it, and the attrition rate for the few women who had attempted it was even higher. The first day of BUD/S had been a wake-up call unlike anything Sarah had experienced. The instructors made it clear from the beginning that they would show no mercy based on gender, background, or previous accomplishments. Every candidate would be held to the same impossible standards, and those who could not meet them would be removed from the program without hesitation. The physical demands were relentless. Endless hours of running in soft sand, ocean swims in frigid water, obstacle courses that seemed designed by someone with a sadistic imagination, and calisthenic sessions that left even the strongest candidates gasping for breath. But it was the mental warfare that proved to be the most challenging aspect of the training. The instructors seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to identify each candidate's weaknesses and exploit them mercilessly. They would single out individuals during the most exhausting moments, forcing them to perform additional exercises while their classmates continued with the regular training. The constant pressure was designed to simulate the stress of combat situations, where clear thinking and decisive action could mean the difference between life and death. Sarah found herself targeted more frequently than many of her male counterparts, though she could never be certain whether this was due to her gender or simply because the instructors sensed her determination and wanted to test its limits. During one particularly brutal week, she was required to carry extra weight during long-distance runs, complete additional obstacle course repetitions, and endure extended periods of cold water immersion. Each night, she would return to her barracks exhausted and sore, but her resolve never wavered. The infamous Hell Week had nearly broken her. 5.5 days of continuous training with minimal sleep, constant physical exertion, and psychological pressure that pushed candidates to their absolute breaking points. Sarah watched as classmates who had seemed unbreakable during the earlier phases of training suddenly rang the bell that signaled their withdrawal from the program. Each time someone quit, the instructors would remind the remaining candidates that there was no shame in recognizing one's limitations, and that the bell was always there for anyone who had reached theirs. During the worst moments of Hell Week, when her body screamed for rest and her mind struggled to maintain focus, Sarah would think about her father working 18-hour days during harvest season, never complaining about the exhaustion or the physical toll. She would remember her mother's quiet strength as she juggled multiple jobs to help keep their family afloat during difficult times. These memories became her anchor, reminding her that she came from people who did not give up when things became difficult. The underwater training phases brought their own unique challenges. Sarah had always been a strong swimmer, but the demands of combat diving required skills that went far beyond basic water competency. She learned to navigate underwater in complete darkness, to remain calm while her lungs burned for oxygen, and to solve complex problems while dealing with equipment failures in hostile environments. The instructors would deliberately sabotage equipment, remove air supplies, and create emergency scenarios that required split-second decision-making under extreme stress. One particular exercise involved swimming long distances underwater while carrying heavy equipment, surfacing only when absolutely necessary for air. During one attempt, Sarah's breathing apparatus malfunctioned halfway through the course, forcing her to make a critical decision about whether to surface immediately or attempt to continue without proper air supply. She chose to continue, completing the exercise on a single breath, while her classmates and instructors watched in amazement. That moment marked a turning point in how some of her peers viewed her capabilities. The weapons training phases introduced Sarah to equipment and techniques that seemed to belong in a science fiction movie rather than real life. She learned to operate in multiple combat environments, from jungle warfare to urban operations, from desert survival to Arctic conditions. Each new environment brought unique challenges and required different skill sets, but Sarah approached each one with the same methodical determination that had carried her through the earlier phases of training. Her marksmanship scores consistently ranked among the top in her class, a result of countless hours spent on her family's farm hunting and practicing with her father's rifles. The muscle memory developed during those early morning hunting trips translated well to military weapons training, and she found herself adapting quickly to new firearms and shooting positions. The instructors noted her natural accuracy and steady hands, qualities that would prove invaluable in the field operations that lay ahead. The leadership exercises were perhaps the most complex aspect of the training program. Candidates were rotated through leadership positions during various missions and scenarios, with their peers evaluating their performance along with the instructors. Sarah discovered that some of her classmates struggled to follow orders from a female team leader, while others seemed eager to prove their open-mindedness by supporting her regardless of her actual performance. Learning to navigate these dynamics while maintaining focus on mission objectives required a level of emotional intelligence that went beyond pure physical capability. During one particularly challenging leadership exercise, Sarah was tasked with leading a team through a complex urban warfare scenario. The mission involved multiple objectives, time constraints, and simulated enemy forces that seemed to anticipate every move her team made. When equipment failures and simulated casualties began mounting, some team members started questioning her decisions and suggesting alternative approaches. Sarah had to make the difficult choice between maintaining democratic input and asserting decisive leadership when the situation demanded it. She chose to take full command, making rapid decisions based on her assessment of the situation and issuing clear, non-negotiable orders to her team. Some members responded positively to her decisive approach, while others seemed resentful of being commanded by someone they still saw as an outsider. The mission was ultimately successful, but the post-exercise debriefing revealed the ongoing tensions that existed within the group regarding her role and capabilities. As the training program neared its conclusion, Sarah had proven herself capable of meeting every physical and mental challenge that had been placed before her. Her test scores ranked consistently in the top percentile of her class. Her leadership evaluations showed steady improvement, and her instructors acknowledged her exceptional performance. However, she began to sense that her real challenges would begin after graduation, when she would be assigned to an operational team and expected to integrate into the close-knit brotherhood that defined SEAL culture. The graduation ceremony was a moment of immense pride and relief. Sarah's parents had traveled from Iowa to witness their daughter receive her SEAL Trident, the distinctive warfare pin that marked her as a member of the most elite military unit in the world. As she stood with her classmates, listening to speeches about honor, commitment, and the sacred trust that had been placed in them, Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. She was among the first women to complete the program successfully, and she knew that her performance in the field would influence whether others would be given similar opportunities in the future. The weeks following graduation were filled with additional specialized training, administrative processing, and preparation for her first operational assignment. Sarah learned that she would be assigned to a team based on the West Coast, working primarily in maritime operations and counterterrorism missions. The team she would be joining had a reputation for excellence, but also for maintaining traditional attitudes about military culture and unit cohesion. Her new commanding officer, Commander James Mitchell, was a 20-year veteran with multiple combat deployments and a distinguished service record. During their first meeting, he made it clear that he would evaluate her performance based solely on her contribution to mission success and team effectiveness. He acknowledged the unique position she was in as one of the first women in the unit, but emphasized that special consideration based on gender would not be part of his leadership approach. The other members of her new team represented a cross-section of military backgrounds and specializations. There was Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a demolitions expert with 15 years of SEAL experience who had served in conflicts around the world. Petty Officer First Class Johnson specialized in communications and electronic warfare, while Petty Officer Second Class Williams was the team's medic and had saved countless lives during his previous deployments. Each man brought unique skills and experience that would be essential to their collective success. Sarah's first few weeks with the team were marked by a careful period of mutual evaluation. Her new teammates seemed to be withholding judgment while they observed her performance during training exercises and team-building activities. She could sense their curiosity about her capabilities, mixed with uncertainty about how her presence might change the dynamics that had developed among them over years of working together. The team's daily routine included physical training sessions that pushed all members to their limits, regardless of their previous fitness levels. Sarah found herself working harder than ever to keep pace with teammates who had been maintaining peak physical condition for years. The morning runs along the beach became opportunities to demonstrate her endurance and commitment, while the afternoon strength training sessions challenged her to lift weights and complete exercises that tested the absolute limits of her physical capabilities. During tactical training exercises, Sarah began to understand the level of precision and coordination required for successful SEAL operations. Every movement had to be calculated, every decision had to account for multiple variables, and every team member had to trust completely in the abilities and judgment of their colleagues. The margin for error in real-world operations would be essentially zero, and the training scenarios were designed to replicate that pressure as closely as possible. One afternoon, while the team was conducting close-quarters combat drills, Sarah overheard a conversation between two junior enlisted personnel from other units who were observing the training session. Their comments were not openly hostile, but they expressed skepticism about whether a woman could truly perform at the level required for SEAL operations. They questioned whether physical standards had been lowered to accommodate her inclusion, and wondered aloud whether her presence might compromise the team's effectiveness in actual combat situations. Master Chief Rodriguez happened to overhear the same conversation, and Sarah watched as his expression darkened. After the training session concluded, he approached the two observers and engaged them in what appeared to be a very direct conversation about their comments. While Sarah could not hear the specific words being exchanged, it was clear that Rodriguez was making his position on the matter very clear to them. Later that evening, Rodriguez approached Sarah privately and asked about her experience transitioning to the team. He acknowledged that the integration process was likely more challenging for her than for typical new team members, and he wanted to ensure that she felt comfortable bringing any concerns to the team leadership. Sarah appreciated his gesture, but she also made it clear that she expected to earn her place through performance rather than through special consideration or protection from criticism. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah gradually began to feel more integrated into the team's culture and operational rhythm. her teammates started including her in informal social activities, and the conversations during training breaks became more relaxed and natural. She proved her value during complex training scenarios, demonstrating tactical judgment and technical skills that earned the respect of even the most skeptical team members. The announcement of their first operational deployment came during a routine team meeting on a Tuesday morning in October. Commander Mitchell informed them that they would be deploying to a classified location for a counter-terrorism mission that would test all of their specialized skills. The mission would involve maritime infiltration, urban operations, and coordination with international partners. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she realized that all of her training and preparation would soon be put to the ultimate test in real-world conditions. As the team began their pre-deployment preparations, Sarah noticed that the base cafeteria had become a place where her presence drew attention from personnel throughout the facility. She had grown accustomed to the curious looks and whispered conversations that seemed to follow her wherever she went, but the intensity seemed to increase as word spread about her upcoming deployment. Some of the attention was positive, with people expressing admiration for her achievements and wishing her success. However, other reactions were less supportive, and she occasionally overheard comments questioning whether she was truly ready for operational duties. The cafeteria conversations would soon take on much greater significance than Sarah could have imagined, setting the stage for an incident that would define not only her career, but also the ongoing debate about women's roles in special operations forces. The Naval Amphibious Base Coronado cafeteria buzzed with its usual lunchtime energy as Sarah Chen entered with her meal tray, scanning for an empty table. The large facility served hundreds of military personnel daily, from new recruits to seasoned veterans, and the conversations that filled the air reflected the full spectrum of military life. Sarah had learned to navigate these social spaces carefully, understanding that her presence often altered the dynamics of whatever group she joined. She settled at a table near the windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, pulling out a technical manual she had been studying during her free time. The material covered advanced underwater navigation techniques that would be crucial for their upcoming deployment. As she ate and read, Sarah was peripherally aware of the conversations happening around her, but she had trained herself to focus on her own priorities rather than becoming distracted by the constant undercurrent of attention her presence generated. At a table across the cafeteria, a group of junior officers from various units had gathered for their regular lunch meeting. The conversation had started with routine military topics, but had gradually shifted toward the recent policy changes that had opened combat positions to women. Lieutenant Mark Thompson, a helicopter pilot with 3 years of service, had strong opinions about these developments and was not hesitant to share them with anyone who would listen. "I'm just saying that there are biological realities that no amount of political correctness can change," Thompson said, cutting into his sandwich with more force than necessary. "The physical demands of special operations are what they are for a reason. When your life depends on whether your teammate can carry you out of a combat zone, you want to know they have the strength to do it." Ensign David Park, recently graduated from the Naval Academy, nodded thoughtfully as he considered Thompson's words. Park had been raised to respect diverse perspectives, but his limited military experience left him uncertain about complex issues, like gender integration in combat units. "But hasn't she completed all the same training requirements as everyone else?" he asked. "If she met the standards, doesn't that prove she can do the job?" Lieutenant Junior Grade Rebecca Martinez, one of the few women at the table, shifted uncomfortably as the conversation continued. As a supply officer, she had not faced the same level of scrutiny regarding her physical capabilities, but she understood the broader implications of the debate. "The thing is," she said carefully, "standards are standards. If someone meets them, their gender shouldn't matter." Thompson leaned back in his chair, a skeptical expression crossing his face. "That's assuming the standards haven't been quietly lowered or that exceptions haven't been made behind closed doors. The military has political pressure to show success in these programs, and that pressure can lead to compromised standards. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but we'd never know if it did." Chief Petty Officer Mike Harrison, a seasoned veteran with 15 years of service, had been listening to the exchange with growing irritation. Harrison had worked with female sailors in various capacities throughout his career and had developed strong opinions about their capabilities and contributions. "You want to know what I think?" he said, his voice carrying the authority that came with experience. I think some people are so invested in proving a point about equality that they're willing to ignore practical realities, Harrison continued, warming to his subject as the others listened. Look, I've got nothing against women in the... Some of the best sailors I've served with have been women, but there's a difference between serving on a ship or in a support role and being part of a special operations team where unit cohesion and absolute trust are matters of life and death. Ensign Park looked genuinely confused by the complexity of the issue. But if she passed the training, doesn't that mean she can be trusted? I mean, they don't just hand out SEAL tridents as participation trophies. That's exactly my point, Thompson interjected. We don't really know if she passed the same training that everyone else has to pass. There's political pressure to make these programs work, and that pressure filters down through the chain of command. Instructors know that failing the first woman to attempt the program would generate a lot of negative attention. Lieutenant Martinez found herself in the uncomfortable position of defending someone she had never met while also trying to maintain her relationships with her male colleagues. Don't you think that's a little paranoid? The SEAL training program has a reputation for being absolutely uncompromising. It seems unlikely that they would risk that reputation for political reasons. Chief Harrison shrugged, unmoved by her argument. Reputations can be sacrificed for political expedience. It's happened before in other contexts. The question is whether we're willing to bet lives on an experiment in social engineering. The conversation had attracted the attention of personnel at nearby tables, and several other service members had drifted closer to listen to the debate. The topic of women in combat roles had been a source of ongoing discussion throughout the military, and strong opinions existed on all sides of the issue. Petty Officer First Class Tony Ramos, a SEAL team member from a different unit, had been eating lunch alone when he overheard the discussion. Ramos had served multiple combat deployments and had strong views about team cohesion and operational effectiveness. "You guys want to know the real issue?" he said, joining the conversation without invitation. "It's not just about physical strength. It's about the psychological dynamics that develop in high-stress situations." Ramos continued his impromptu lecture, drawing on his operational experience to support his points. When you're in combat, your team becomes your family. The bonds that develop are unlike anything else in human experience. Adding gender dynamics to that mix creates complications that can get people killed. It's not about capability. It's about distraction and divided loyalties. Thompson nodded enthusiastically, pleased to have support from someone with actual special operations experience. Exactly. That's what I've been trying to say. There are factors beyond just meeting minimum standards. The whole dynamic of the team changes when you introduce gender differences. Lieutenant Martinez was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but she felt obligated to continue defending her position. But isn't that just an assumption based on traditional attitudes? Maybe those dynamics only exist because we expect them to exist. Ramos looked at Martinez with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "Ma'am, with all due respect, until you've been in a firefight where your survival depends on absolute trust in your teammates, you might not fully appreciate the importance of unit cohesion. These aren't theoretical issues we're discussing." The exchange had grown heated enough to draw the attention of senior personnel in the cafeteria, including Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, who was Sarah's teammate. Rodriguez had been finishing his lunch when he noticed the animated discussion taking place across the room. Although he could not hear the specific words being exchanged, the body language and gestures of the participants made it clear that they were engaged in a serious debate about something controversial. Sarah remained focused on her technical manual, but she was becoming increasingly aware of the raised voices and animated gestures from the group across the cafeteria. She had experienced similar situations before, and had learned that engaging in such debates rarely led to productive outcomes. Her strategy was to demonstrate her capabilities through performance rather than through arguments or confrontations. However, the conversation was escalating in both volume and intensity, making it difficult for anyone in the immediate area to ignore. Chief Harrison had become the unofficial spokesman for the group, and his voice carried clearly across the space between tables. "The bottom line," Harrison declared, "is that special operations units are not the place for social experiments. When American lives are on the line, we need to prioritize mission effectiveness over political correctness. If that means maintaining traditional standards and traditional team compositions, then that's what we should do." Ensign Park, still struggling to form his own opinions on the matter, posed what he thought was a reasonable question. But how do we know if we don't try? I mean, other countries have successfully integrated women into their special forces units. Thompson dismissed this argument with a wave of his hand. Other countries have different standards, different missions, and different operational requirements. What works for them might not work for us. Besides, are we really willing to use American service members as test subjects for unproven theories about gender integration? The debate had reached a point where it was attracting attention from throughout the cafeteria, and Sarah found it impossible to continue concentrating on her reading. She closed her manual and looked around the room, taking note of who was participating in the discussion and who was simply listening. The dynamics were familiar to her. A core group of vocal opponents dominating the conversation, while others either agreed silently or felt uncomfortable challenging them publicly. Master Chief Rodriguez had moved closer to the discussion, positioning himself where he could hear the specific comments being made. What he heard confirmed his suspicions about the nature of the debate, and his expression grew increasingly serious as he listened to the various arguments being presented. "You know what really bothers me about this whole situation?" Ramos continued, apparently energized by the attention his comments were receiving. "It's the fact that questioning these policies gets you labeled as sexist or backward. Since when did having legitimate concerns about operational effectiveness become politically incorrect?" Lieutenant Martinez attempted one final defense of her position. "I just think we should judge people based on their individual capabilities, rather than making assumptions based on gender. If someone can do the job, they should have the opportunity to do it." Chief Harrison looked around the table with the expression of someone who felt he was surrounded by naive idealists. "That sounds great in theory, but the real world doesn't work that way. In combat situations, you don't have time to evaluate individual capabilities. You need to know that every member of your team can perform at the level you expect, and that level is based on standards that have been proven over decades of successful operations." The conversation had attracted the attention of nearly everyone in the immediate area, and several groups had stopped their own discussions to listen to the debate. The topic had clearly struck a nerve throughout the military community, and strong emotions were evident on both sides of the issue. Petty Officer Second Class James Walsh, another SEAL from a different team, had been drawn into the conversation by the mention of operational standards. Walsh had recently returned from a deployment, where his team had worked alongside international partners who included female special operations personnel. His experience had given him a different perspective on the issue than some of his colleagues. "I've actually worked with female special operators from other countries," Walsh said, his voice carrying a note of authority that quieted the other participants. "Some of them were damn good at their jobs, better than some of the men I've served with, if I'm being honest." This comment created an uncomfortable silence around the table as the other participants processed this information. Ramos was the first to respond, his voice carrying a defensive tone. "That may be true, but those were foreign units with different standards and different mission requirements. We can't assume that what works for them will work for us." Walsh shrugged, unmoved by Ramos's argument. "Standards are standards, and competence is competence. If someone can do the job, I don't care what they look like or what gender they are. I care about whether they can watch my back and complete the mission." Thompson seized on what he saw as an inconsistency in Walsh's position. "But you're talking about isolated cases. We're talking about a systemic change in policy that affects the entire special operations community. Individual exceptions don't prove that the policy is sound." The debate continued for several more minutes, with participants becoming increasingly entrenched in their positions and less willing to consider alternative viewpoints. The conversation had taken on the characteristics of a political argument rather than a professional discussion about military policy and operational effectiveness. Sarah had finally had enough of the indirect criticism and speculation about her capabilities. She closed her technical manual, gathered her belongings, and stood up from her table. The movement caught the attention of several people in the cafeteria, including the participants in the ongoing debate. As she approached the group, the conversation gradually died down, and all eyes turned toward her. The participants suddenly realized that they had been discussing someone who was actually present in the room and might have overheard their entire conversation. The atmosphere became noticeably more tense as they waited to see how she would respond to their comments. Master Chief Rodriguez watched the situation unfold with keen interest, ready to intervene if necessary, but curious to see how his teammate would handle the confrontation. He had observed Sarah's responses to similar situations in the past and had developed respect for her ability to maintain composure under pressure. Sarah stood beside the table where the debate had been taking place, making eye contact with each of the participants before speaking. Her voice was calm and controlled, but there was an underlying strength that commanded attention from everyone in the immediate area. "I couldn't help but overhear your discussion about women in special operations," she said, her tone professional but direct. "I thought you might be interested in hearing from someone who has actually completed the training you've been debating." The silence that followed her words was profound. Several of the participants looked uncomfortable, as if they had been caught gossiping and suddenly found themselves face to face with the subject of their conversation. Others maintained their confident expressions, apparently prepared to defend their positions even in direct confrontation. Chief Harrison was the first to recover from the surprise, and he responded with the authority of someone accustomed to being challenged. "We weren't discussing you personally, ma'am. We were discussing policy implications and operational concerns that affect the entire military." Sarah nodded, acknowledging his attempt to depersonalize the conversation.
"I understand that, Chief.
"But those policy implications and operational concerns are based on assumptions about capabilities and performance. Since I've actually been through the training process you're discussing, I thought I might be able to provide some factual information to inform your debate." The exchange had attracted the attention of nearly everyone in the cafeteria, and conversations at other tables had stopped as people turned to watch the developing confrontation. The situation had all the elements of a dramatic moment that would be discussed and analyzed throughout the base for weeks to come. Thompson, apparently emboldened by the public nature of the encounter, decided to press his position directly. "No disrespect intended, but the concerns we've been discussing go beyond individual performance and training. They involve long-term operational effectiveness and unit cohesion under combat conditions." Sarah's expression remained calm, but those who knew her well could detect the subtle signs of controlled anger beginning to surface. She had dealt with skepticism and criticism throughout her military career, but the public nature of this challenge was something new and potentially more serious than previous encounters. "I appreciate your concerns about operational effectiveness," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotional undercurrent. "Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing a practical demonstration of the training standards you're questioning." The suggestion caught everyone off guard, and the atmosphere in the cafeteria shifted from tense debate to anticipation of an actual confrontation. Master Chief Rodriguez moved closer to the group, recognizing that the situation was about to escalate beyond mere verbal exchanges. The silence that followed Sarah's challenge was electric with tension. Every person in the cafeteria seemed to hold their breath as they waited to see how the confrontation would unfold. Chief Harrison looked around the table at his colleagues, apparently weighing his options as the public nature of the situation became clear to him. Backing down would suggest weakness, but escalating could lead to consequences that might affect his career. Lieutenant Thompson, perhaps feeling that he had initiated the debate and therefore bore some responsibility for seeing it through, was the first to respond to Sarah's challenge. "What kind of demonstration are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Sarah glanced around the cafeteria, taking note of the assembled audience and the various personnel who had stopped their own activities to watch the developing confrontation. She realized that this moment would likely define not only her own reputation, but also influence how future women in similar positions would be perceived and treated. "The physical fitness standards that you've been questioning," Sarah replied, her voice carrying clearly across the now quiet space. "Since there seems to be doubt about whether I actually met the same requirements as my male colleagues, perhaps we could settle the question with a direct comparison." Master Chief Rodriguez moved closer to the group, his expression indicating both concern and interest in how the situation would develop. As Sarah's teammate, he had a professional interest in the outcome, but he also understood the broader implications for unit cohesion and morale. Petty Officer Ramos leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with the calculating expression of someone evaluating an opponent. His special operations background gave him confidence in his own physical capabilities, but he was also aware that underestimating any SEAL-trained individual could lead to embarrassing consequences. "What specific standards are you talking about?" Ramos asked, his tone suggesting that he was prepared to accept the challenge despite his reservations about the wisdom of the confrontation. Sarah had anticipated this question and had already decided on an approach that would demonstrate multiple aspects of SEAL training simultaneously. The basic physical screening test that every SEAL candidate must pass, she said. 500-yard swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and a 1.5-mile run, all within the time and repetition standards required for program entry. The suggestion caught several participants off guard, as they had expected her to propose something less comprehensive or more limited in scope. The basic physical screening test was designed to evaluate overall fitness across multiple domains, and completing it at the required level demanded both strength and endurance. Chief Harrison found himself in an increasingly difficult position. Accepting the challenge would require him to participate in physical competition with someone he had been criticizing, while declining would suggest that he was unwilling to back up his arguments with action. The presence of numerous witnesses made either choice potentially problematic for his reputation and career. "I'm not sure this is the appropriate venue for settling policy debates," Harrison said, attempting to find a middle ground that would allow him to withdraw from the confrontation without losing face entirely. Lieutenant Martinez, who had been defending women's inclusion in combat roles throughout the debate, now found herself in the unexpected position of watching a practical test of her arguments. She felt conflicted about the situation, recognizing both the potential value of such a demonstration and the risks it posed for everyone involved. "Maybe we should take this discussion to a more private setting," Martinez suggested, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation and its potential consequences for all participants. Sarah considered this suggestion but realized that moving the challenge to a private setting would eliminate the broader educational value of the demonstration. The skepticism and criticism she faced were not limited to the individuals at this table, and a private resolution would do nothing to address the wider attitudes that created ongoing challenges for her and other women in similar positions. "The physical training facility is public space available to all military personnel," Sarah replied. "Anyone who's interested in observing the standards being applied can join us there." The suggestion transformed the confrontation from a verbal debate into a potential public spectacle that could have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Several of the participants began to realize that their casual lunchtime criticism had escalated into a situation that might affect their professional reputations. Ensign Park, who had been mostly listening throughout the debate, now spoke up with a question that reflected his uncertainty about the appropriate course of action. "Is this really the best way to resolve disagreements about military policy?" he asked, looking around the table for guidance from his more experienced colleagues. Petty Officer Walsh, who had earlier defended the capabilities of female special operators based on his operational experience, found himself in the position of either supporting Sarah's challenge or appearing to contradict his earlier statements. "If we're going to debate standards and capabilities," he said slowly, "then maybe a practical demonstration is exactly what we need." The comment seemed to crystallize the situation for the other participants, making it clear that the debate had reached a point where backing down would be difficult for any of the parties involved. The original criticism had been made publicly, Sarah's challenge had been issued publicly, and any resolution would necessarily be equally public. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of senior enlisted leadership. "Before this goes any further," he said, addressing the entire group, "everyone needs to understand that what happens here will reflect on your professional conduct and judgment. Personal disagreements don't need to become public spectacles." Rodriguez's intervention provided an opportunity for de-escalation, but it also highlighted the seriousness of the situation and the potential consequences for everyone involved. His words carried particular weight given his seniority and his position as Sarah's teammate. Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's attempt to provide perspective, but she had already decided that the situation required a definitive response rather than diplomatic deflection. The criticism had been public and specific, and she believed that only a public and specific response would adequately address the underlying issues. "I understand the concerns about public confrontations," Sarah said, addressing Rodriguez's comments while maintaining eye contact with her original challengers. "But when professional capabilities are questioned in a public forum, sometimes they need to be defended in the same forum." Chief Harrison realized that the situation had progressed beyond the point where he could simply withdraw without consequences for his reputation. His initial criticism had been made confidently and publicly, and numerous witnesses would remember both his comments and his response to Sarah's challenge. "Fine," Harrison said, his voice carrying resignation mixed with determination. "If you want to settle this with a fitness test, I'm willing to participate. But let's be clear about what we're actually testing and what the results will prove." The acceptance of the challenge created a palpable shift in the atmosphere of the cafeteria. Conversations that had stopped to listen to the debate now resumed with animated discussions about the developing competition. Personnel began making plans to observe the physical testing, and word began spreading throughout the base about the upcoming confrontation. Lieutenant Thompson found himself committed to a course of action that he was beginning to regret, but his earlier statements made retreat impossible without significant damage to his credibility. "I suppose we should establish clear parameters for the test," he said, attempting to maintain some control over the situation he had helped create. Sarah nodded, appreciating the attempt to formalize the arrangement and ensure fairness for all participants. The standard Navy SEAL physical screening test, administered according to current regulations, with qualified personnel observing to ensure accuracy and proper procedure. The specificity of her proposal impressed several observers, as it demonstrated both confidence in her capabilities and commitment to fair and objective evaluation. The suggestion of qualified observers would ensure that the results could not be disputed or dismissed as biased or inaccurate. Petty Officer Ramos stood up from the table, apparently having made his decision about participation. "I'll join this demonstration," he announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to physical challenges. "It's been a while since I've tested myself against current standards." The participation of an experienced SEAL operator added credibility to the challenge and increased the stakes for all involved. Ramos's reputation and experience meant that his performance would serve as a benchmark against which the others would be measured. Lieutenant Martinez found herself in an increasingly complex position as the only woman who had been defending female inclusion in combat roles. Although she had not personally criticized Sarah's capabilities, the logic of the situation suggested that she should support the challenge by participating herself. "I'm not SEAL qualified," Martinez said, addressing the unspoken expectation that she should join the competition. "My participation wouldn't really prove anything about special operations standards." Sarah understood Martinez's reluctance, but also recognized the value of having another woman participate in the demonstration. "Navy fitness standards are Navy fitness standards," she replied. "The test will show what level of performance each of us can achieve, regardless of our specialties." The conversation had attracted the attention of several senior officers who had been eating lunch at nearby tables. Commander Patricia Williams, the base executive officer, had been observing the developing situation with growing concern about its potential impact on good order and discipline. Commander Williams approached the group, her expression indicating both authority and displeasure with the public nature of the confrontation. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, her tone making it clear that she expected a comprehensive explanation of the situation. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward to provide the explanation, recognizing that senior officer intervention might either defuse the situation or escalate it to a level that would have serious consequences for everyone involved. "Ma'am, there's been a disagreement about physical standards and capabilities that has evolved into a proposed fitness test demonstration." Williams listened to Rodriguez's explanation while observing the body language and expressions of the various participants. Her experience with military personnel gave her insight into the dynamics that had led to the current situation, and she could see that simple dismissal of the challenge would not resolve the underlying tensions. "And you think that a public fitness competition is the appropriate way to resolve professional disagreements?" Williams asked, her question directed at the entire group rather than any specific individual. Sarah stepped forward to address the commander's question directly. "Ma'am, when professional capabilities are questioned publicly, sometimes a public demonstration is the most effective way to address those questions factually, rather than through continued speculation." Williams studied Sarah for a moment, taking note of her composure and the careful way she had framed her response. The commander's experience with personnel issues had taught her to recognize when situations required intervention and when they might be allowed to resolve themselves through natural consequences.
"Very well," Williams said after a moment of consideration.
"If you're all determined to proceed with this demonstration, it will be conducted properly and officially. Base fitness staff will administer the test according to current regulations, and the results will be recorded and documented." The commander's decision to allow the challenge to proceed while ensuring official oversight added both legitimacy and seriousness to the situation. The participants realized that what had started as a cafeteria argument would now become an official military record that could affect their careers and reputations. Chief Harrison felt a moment of uncertainty as the implications of the commander's decision became clear to him. Official documentation meant that poor performance would become part of his permanent record, while strong performance would validate his criticism of current policies in ways that might create their own complications. "When will this test be conducted?" Thompson asked, apparently hoping for time to prepare both physically and mentally for the challenge. Commander Williams consulted her schedule. Considering the logistics of arranging official fitness testing with qualified supervisors and proper equipment, "Tomorrow afternoon at 1400 hours, she announced. "That will give everyone time to prepare properly and ensure that we have appropriate supervision and documentation." The timing provided less than 24 hours for preparation, which seemed both fair and challenging for all participants. None of the individuals involved were in poor physical condition, but performing at maximum capability required both physical readiness and mental preparation. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension as the details of the challenge were finalized. She was confident in her physical capabilities, but she also understood that the stakes extended far beyond personal performance. Her results would influence how other women in similar positions would be perceived and treated throughout the military. As the group began to disperse, conversations throughout the cafeteria shifted to speculation about the upcoming competition and its likely outcomes. Personnel began placing informal wagers on the results, and word spread rapidly throughout the base about the challenge and its participants. Master Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah as she prepared to leave the cafeteria. "You realize what you've gotten yourself into," he said, his tone carrying both concern and admiration for her willingness to confront the situation directly. "I realize that some battles need to be fought publicly in order to be won permanently," Sarah replied, her voice reflecting both determination and awareness of the risks she was taking. The remainder of the day passed quickly as news of the challenge spread throughout Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Personnel from various units expressed interest in observing the competition, and several senior officers made plans to attend the demonstration. The simple cafeteria debate had evolved into a significant event that would be remembered and discussed long after the physical testing was completed. That evening, Sarah spent time reviewing her training regimen and ensuring that she was physically and mentally prepared for the challenge ahead. She understood that her performance would be scrutinized not only by those who had criticized her, but by anyone who had questions about women's capabilities in special operations roles. The stakes could not have been higher, and the outcome would resonate far beyond the confines of the base fitness facility. The Naval Amphibious Base Coronado Fitness Facility had never seen an audience quite like the one that gathered on that Tuesday afternoon. Word of the challenge had spread throughout the base with remarkable speed, and personnel from various units had found reasons to be present during what was officially described as a routine fitness assessment. The atmosphere carried an electric tension that transformed the normally businesslike environment into something resembling a sporting event. Commander Williams arrived early to ensure that proper procedures would be followed, and that the event would maintain its official character despite the unusual circumstances that had prompted it. She had spent considerable time the previous evening reviewing regulations and consulting with her superiors about the appropriate handling of the situation. The consensus had been that allowing the challenge to proceed under official supervision was preferable to driving the confrontation underground where it might manifest in more problematic ways. Master Chief Petty Officer James Sullivan, the base fitness coordinator, had been tasked with administering the physical screening test according to current Navy regulations. Sullivan was a 22-year veteran with extensive experience in fitness evaluation, and his presence ensured that the results would be beyond dispute regardless of their outcome. He had reviewed the testing protocols multiple times and assembled the necessary equipment and documentation to conduct a complete and accurate assessment. Sarah arrived at the facility 30 minutes before the scheduled test time, wearing standard Navy physical training uniform and carrying a water bottle and towel. Her expression was calm and focused, but those who knew her well could detect subtle signs of the intense concentration she brought to challenging situations. She had spent the previous evening in careful preparation, reviewing her training regimen and ensuring that both her body and mind were ready for maximum performance. Chief Harrison appeared shortly after Sarah, accompanied by Lieutenant Thompson and Petty Officer Ramos. The three men had apparently spent time together planning their approach to the challenge, and their body language suggested both confidence and determination. Harrison had awakened early that morning for additional physical preparation, uncertain about his current fitness level relative to the official standards he would be required to meet. Lieutenant Martinez had ultimately decided to participate in the demonstration despite her earlier reluctance. She understood that her performance would not directly address the questions about special operations standards, but she felt that her participation would demonstrate broader female capabilities within the military structure. Her presence also provided Sarah with another woman among the participants, reducing the symbolic weight that might otherwise rest entirely on Sarah's performance. Petty Officer Walsh had also chosen to participate, motivated by his earlier defense of female special operators and his desire to support his stated positions with personal action. His operational experience and known fitness level made him a credible participant, whose performance would serve as a benchmark for the others. As the official start time approached, the assembled audience had grown to include personnel from throughout the base hierarchy. Senior officers, junior enlisted personnel, and everyone in between had found reasons to observe the proceedings. The crowd maintained respectful quiet, but the underlying tension was palpable as everyone waited to see how the challenge would unfold. Master Chief Sullivan called the participants together and explained the testing procedures that would be followed. The Navy SEAL physical screening test consisted of 5 events: a 500-yard swim, maximum push-ups in 2 minutes, maximum sit-ups in 2 minutes, maximum pull-ups with no time limit, and a 1.5-mile run. Each event had minimum standards that candidates must meet, with higher scores obviously being preferred. The swim portion will be conducted in the base pool, using regulation lanes and timing equipment, Sullivan announced to both participants and observers. Each participant will be individually timed, and proper stroke technique must be maintained throughout the distance. The swimming standard requires completion within 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Sarah nodded her understanding of the requirements, mentally reviewing her swimming technique and pacing strategy. The pool environment was familiar to her from her regular training routine, and she felt confident in her ability to complete the distance well within the required time. Her farm background had not included much swimming, but her Navy training had developed her water skills to a high level. Chief Harrison appeared less comfortable with the swimming requirement, as his recent training had focused more on land-based fitness activities than aquatic skills. However, his military experience included sufficient swimming training to meet basic requirements, and he was determined not to fail on the first event of the challenge. The participants were given time to warm up and prepare for the swimming portion, while Master Chief Sullivan reviewed timing procedures with his assistants. The pool area had been cleared of other users to ensure accurate timing and eliminate distractions during the testing. Several observers positioned themselves in the gallery area, where they could watch the swimming without interfering with the official proceedings. Sarah was assigned to Lane 4 for her swimming test, a position that would allow clear observation by both officials and spectators. She spent several minutes stretching and preparing mentally for the physical challenge ahead. Her breathing was controlled and steady, indicating the mental discipline that had carried her through previous challenging situations. The swimming event began with Chief Harrison, who approached the task with determination but obvious apprehension about his performance relative to the younger participants. His stroke technique was adequate, but lacked the efficiency that came from recent practice, and his pace suggested that he would finish within the required time, but without significant margin for error. Harrison completed the 500-yard distance in 11 minutes and 47 seconds, well within the required standard, but noticeably slower than what might be expected from someone criticizing others' fitness levels. His breathing was labored as he climbed from the pool, and he required several minutes to recover sufficiently to observe the remaining participants. Lieutenant Thompson's performance was significantly better, reflecting his younger age and more recent fitness training. His stroke technique was smooth and efficient, and his pacing suggested confidence in his ability to complete the distance comfortably within the time limit. Thompson finished in 10 minutes and 15 seconds, a respectable time that validated his participation in the challenge. Petty Officer Ramos approached the swimming test with the confidence of someone accustomed to exceeding physical standards. His stroke technique reflected extensive training and experience, and his pace was both efficient and sustainable. Ramos completed the distance in 9 minutes and 38 seconds, establishing himself as the early leader and demonstrating the fitness level expected from an experienced SEAL operator. Lieutenant Martinez surprised several observers with her swimming performance, completing the 500-yard distance in 10 minutes and 52 seconds. Her time was well within the required standard and compared favorably with her male colleagues, providing early evidence that gender was not necessarily a determining factor in meeting military fitness requirements. Petty Officer Walsh's swimming time of 9 minutes and 45 seconds confirmed his reputation as a well-conditioned special operations professional. His performance was consistent with Ramos's results and established a benchmark that would challenge the remaining participants in subsequent events. Sarah's approach to the swimming test reflected both confidence and calculation. Her stroke technique was efficient and sustainable, indicating extensive training and natural aquatic ability. Her pacing suggested that she was swimming well within her capabilities while ensuring completion within the required time parameters. As Sarah completed her final laps, observers noted her controlled breathing and steady pace. She touched the pool wall at exactly 9 minutes and 22 seconds, establishing the fastest time among all participants, and demonstrating swimming capability that exceeded the performance of several experienced military professionals. The result created a murmur of surprise among the assembled observers and visibly impressed Master Chief Sullivan, who had administered similar tests to hundreds of military personnel throughout his career. Sarah's time was not only faster than her challengers, but placed her in the top percentile of all personnel he had tested. The participants were given time to change into dry clothing and prepare for the calisthenics portions of the testing. The push-up and sit-up events would be conducted in the main gymnasium area, where more observers could witness the proceedings. The pull-up test would take place at regulation equipment that had been inspected and certified for accuracy. Chief Harrison's confidence had been shaken by his swimming performance and Sarah's impressive result. He realized that his assumptions about relative fitness levels might have been based more on stereotypes than factual assessment. However, he remained determined to perform well in the strength-based events where he believed his experience and training would provide advantages. The push-up test required maximum repetitions within a 2-minute time limit, with strict standards for proper form and technique. Each repetition had to include full extension of the arms and lowering the chest to within inches of the ground. Master Chief Sullivan would personally count each participant's repetitions to ensure accuracy and consistency. Sarah performed her push-ups with mechanical precision, maintaining perfect form throughout the 2-minute period while achieving a steady, sustainable pace. Her farm background had developed functional strength that translated well to military fitness requirements, and her SEAL training had refined her technique to maximize efficiency and minimize fatigue. When time expired, Sarah had completed 87 push-ups, a number that exceeded the minimum requirement by a substantial margin, and compared favorably with the performance standards expected from male special operations personnel. Several observers expressed audible surprise at her performance, having apparently harbored doubts about her upper body strength capabilities. Chief Harrison managed 68 push-ups, a respectable performance that met the minimum standards but fell short of the level he had hoped to achieve. His technique deteriorated somewhat during the final 30 seconds, indicating that his current fitness level was adequate but not exceptional. The result was sufficient to avoid embarrassment but did not support his earlier criticism of others' capabilities. Lieutenant Thompson's 74 push-ups represented solid performance that validated his participation in the challenge without establishing him as a standout performer. His technique remained consistent throughout the test period, indicating good training and preparation for the event. Petty Officer Ramos achieved 81 push-ups, demonstrating the fitness level expected from an experienced SEAL operator. His performance was strong and consistent with his reputation, though it was noticeably exceeded by Sarah's result. The comparison provided concrete evidence that gender was not necessarily a limiting factor in meeting special operations fitness standards. Lieutenant Martinez completed 59 push-ups, meeting the minimum female standards for her age group, while demonstrating that she maintained good fitness levels despite her non-combat military specialty. Her performance contributed to the overall impression that individual capability varied more significantly than gender-based generalizations might suggest. Petty Officer Walsh's 79 push-ups confirmed his reputation as a well-conditioned special operations professional. His performance was consistent with expectations based on his operational experience and training background. The sit-up test followed immediately after a brief rest period, with the same 2-minute time limit and strict form requirements. This event tested core strength and muscular endurance, capabilities that were essential for the physical demands of special operations training and missions. Sarah's sit-up performance was equally impressive, with 92 repetitions that demonstrated exceptional core strength and endurance. Her technique remained consistent throughout the test period, and she showed no signs of fatigue or form deterioration as time expired. The result placed her significantly above minimum requirements and compared favorably with elite male performers. The pull-up test represented the final strength-based event and traditionally served as the most challenging requirement for many military personnel. The exercise required participants to hang from a bar and pull their bodies upward until their chin cleared the bar, then lower back to full arm extension before beginning the next repetition. Sarah approached the pull-up bar with obvious confidence, having developed upper body strength through years of farm work and intensive military training. Her technique was efficient and controlled, with each repetition meeting the strict standards required for official counting. When she finally reached muscle failure, she had completed 19 pull-ups, a result that exceeded the minimum requirement and demonstrated exceptional upper body strength relative to her body weight. The final event was the 1.5-mile run, conducted on the base track with official timing and multiple observers to ensure accuracy. This test evaluated cardiovascular endurance and running efficiency, capabilities that were fundamental to virtually all military operations and especially critical for special operations personnel. The running event would determine the final standings among the participants and provide the most visible demonstration of overall fitness levels. The required completion time was 10 minutes and 30 seconds, though competitive performance typically required significantly faster times. Sarah had always been a strong runner, developing her endurance through years of farm work and military training that emphasized cardiovascular fitness. Her running form was efficient and economical, indicating both natural ability and extensive coaching in proper technique. She maintained a steady pace throughout the distance that suggested careful pacing and confidence in her finishing kick. As the participants approached the final quarter mile, Sarah was running in the lead position with Petty Officer Ramos close behind. The two experienced SEAL operators had separated themselves from the other participants, establishing a pace that challenged both their capabilities and demonstrated the fitness levels achieved through special operations training. Sarah crossed the finish line at 9 minutes and 38 seconds, establishing the fastest time among all participants and completing the demonstration with another performance that exceeded the achievements of her challengers. Her finishing kick had been strong and controlled, indicating that she could have maintained the pace for additional distance if required. Petty Officer Ramos finished second with a time of 9 minutes and 42 seconds, confirming his reputation as an elite performer, while acknowledging Sarah's superior performance. His post-race demeanor indicated both respect for Sarah's capabilities and reassessment of his previous assumptions about gender-based performance limitations. The remaining participants finished within respectable times that met minimum requirements, without approaching the level demonstrated by the two SEAL operators. Chief Harrison's time of 10 minutes and 18 seconds was adequate but unremarkable, while Lieutenant Thompson and the other participants achieved similar results that validated their basic fitness without supporting their earlier criticism of special operations standards. As the participants recovered from their exertion and the observers processed what they had witnessed, it became clear that the demonstration had produced results that challenged many preconceptions about gender and military capability. Sarah had not merely met the standards required for SEAL training, she had exceeded them in head-to-head competition with experienced male personnel who had questioned those very capabilities. The immediate aftermath of the fitness demonstration was marked by an unusual quiet that settled over the assembled crowd. Master Chief Sullivan completed his documentation of the official test results, while the participants caught their breath and processed what had just occurred. The concrete numbers told a story that was difficult to dispute. Sarah Chen had not only met every standard required for SEAL qualification, but had exceeded the performance of every other participant in the challenge. Commander Williams approached the group as the official results were being compiled, her expression reflecting both satisfaction with the professional conduct of the event and awareness of its broader implications. She had observed the entire demonstration and understood that the results would influence discussions about military policy and gender integration far beyond the confines of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Congratulations to all participants for maintaining high standards of professional conduct, Williams announced to the group. The official results will be documented and forwarded through appropriate channels. This demonstration has provided valuable data about individual capabilities and performance standards. Chief Harrison stood apart from the other participants, his face reflecting a mixture of physical exhaustion and emotional processing of the unexpected results. His assumption that military standards had been compromised to accommodate female participation had been directly challenged by Sarah's superior performance across multiple fitness domains. The cognitive dissonance created by this contradiction forced him to reconsider beliefs he had held with confidence just hours earlier. Lieutenant Thompson approached Harrison with obvious uncertainty about how to interpret the results they had just witnessed. The younger officer had been influenced by Harrison's apparent experience and certainty, but the demonstration had raised questions about the reliability of those assumptions. "Chief, what do you make of these results?" Thompson asked quietly, apparently hoping for guidance about how to reconcile his expectations with the reality he had just observed. Harrison looked at Thompson for a long moment before responding, his voice carrying none of the confidence that had characterized his earlier criticism. "I think we may need to reconsider some of our assumptions about capabilities and standards," he said slowly. The results speak for themselves. Petty Officer Ramos had remained near the finish line, ostensibly recovering from his exertion, but actually observing the interactions among the other participants and the assembled crowd. His operational experience had taught him to read situations and people accurately, and he could see that the demonstration had altered the dynamics among everyone present. Sarah completed her post-exercise stretching routine and began gathering her equipment, maintaining the same composed demeanor she had displayed throughout the challenge. Several observers approached her with expressions of respect and curiosity, apparently eager to engage with someone whose performance had exceeded their expectations in such a dramatic fashion. Master Chief Rodriguez, who had observed the entire demonstration from a position near the track, approached Sarah with an expression that combined pride in his teammates' performance with awareness of the broader implications of her achievement. "Outstanding performance," Rodriguez said simply, his tone carrying the understated praise typical of experienced military professionals. "You represented yourself and your training exceptionally well." Sarah nodded her appreciation for his comment while continuing to focus on her equipment and preparation for departure. She understood that the demonstration had been successful in its immediate objective of validating her capabilities, but she also recognized that the broader challenges of integration and acceptance would continue beyond this single event. Lieutenant Martinez had finished her own post-exercise routine and was preparing to leave when she was approached by several female personnel. Their questions and comments reflected excitement about Sarah's performance and curiosity about opportunities for women in military specialties that had previously been closed to them. "Did you expect her to perform at that level?" one of the observers asked Martinez, apparently seeking insight into female capabilities from someone who had participated in the challenge. Martinez considered the question carefully before responding. "I expected her to meet the standards, since she had already completed SEAL training," she replied. "But her performance level was impressive regardless of gender. Those are elite fitness scores by any measure." The crowd began to disperse gradually as personnel returned to their regular duties, but the conversations continued throughout the base as word of the results spread. The demonstration had provided concrete data that challenged assumptions and stereotypes while raising new questions about the integration of women into special operations roles. Several senior officers who had observed the demonstration gathered for an impromptu discussion about its implications for military policy and unit readiness. The results were clear and indisputable, but their meaning for broader policy decisions remained a subject of debate among personnel with different perspectives and experiences. Captain Robert Hayes, the base commanding officer, had arrived during the final events and witnessed Sarah's impressive running performance. His military experience included multiple deployments and extensive exposure to policy discussions about gender integration, giving him perspective on both the operational and political aspects of the situation. Regardless of one's position on policy questions, Hayes commented to his fellow officers, "We've just witnessed a demonstration of individual capability that merits recognition and respect." The captain's statement carried weight throughout the base hierarchy and influenced how other personnel interpreted and discussed the results. His emphasis on individual capability over group generalizations provided a framework for understanding the demonstration that focused on performance rather than politics. Chief Harrison found himself in the difficult position of having his public criticism definitively refuted by the very person he had questioned. His military experience had taught him the importance of acknowledging mistakes and learning from new information, but the public nature of his reversal made the process particularly challenging. During the evening meal period, Harrison approached Sarah's table in the cafeteria where the original confrontation had occurred. The symbolic nature of the location was not lost on either participant or the observers who noticed the interaction. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology," Harrison said, his voice carrying the straightforward tone of someone accustomed to accepting responsibility for his actions. "My comments yesterday were based on assumptions rather than facts, and your performance today demonstrated capabilities that exceed those of most personnel I've served with." Sarah looked up from her meal, studying Harrison's expression to assess the sincerity of his statement. Her response would set the tone for how this resolution was perceived by other personnel and could influence future interactions between supporters and skeptics of gender integration policies. "I appreciate that, Chief," Sarah replied, her voice carrying neither triumph nor resentment. "I think we all benefit when we focus on individual performance rather than group assumptions. I hope today's demonstration provided useful information for everyone involved." The exchange was observed by numerous personnel throughout the cafeteria, and Harrison's public acknowledgement of his mistake created a powerful example of professional conduct and personal growth. His willingness to reverse his position based on new evidence enhanced rather than diminished his reputation among both junior and senior personnel. Petty Officer Ramos approached their table during this conversation, apparently having decided to add his own perspective to the discussion. His operational experience and initial participation in the criticism gave his comments particular significance for how the results would be interpreted. "I've worked with a lot of SEAL operators over the years," Ramos said, addressing both Sarah and Harrison. "What I saw today was elite-level performance that would be impressive coming from anyone. Gender had nothing to do with those results." The comment from an experienced special operations professional carried weight that helped validate Sarah's performance beyond the simple achievement of meeting minimum standards. Ramos's acknowledgement that her capabilities exceeded those of typical SEAL operators provided context that elevated the significance of her achievement. Lieutenant Thompson, who had been observing the interactions from a nearby table, eventually approached the group with obvious uncertainty about his own position in the aftermath of the demonstration. His participation in the original criticism now seemed naive and poorly informed, creating professional embarrassment that would require careful handling. "I want to add my apologies to Chief Harrison's," Thompson said, his voice reflecting both remorse and respect. "I let assumptions override evidence, and that's not consistent with the professional standards I try to maintain." Sarah's response to Thompson was consistent with her earlier comments to Harrison, emphasizing learning and improvement rather than assigning blame or seeking personal vindication. Her approach demonstrated the emotional maturity and leadership capability that had been developed through her challenging training and military experience. The broader conversation that developed around their table began to attract attention from other personnel in the cafeteria, creating an impromptu forum for discussing the implications of the day's demonstration. The discussion remained professional and respectful, but it covered complex topics related to military culture, gender integration, and individual versus group performance standards. Master Chief Rodriguez joined the conversation as it continued, providing perspective from someone who had worked closely with Sarah and observed her integration into the SEAL team structure. His comments helped bridge the gap between the fitness demonstration and the broader questions about operational effectiveness and unit cohesion. "From my perspective as her teammate," Rodriguez said, "today's results confirm what I've observed during our training and preparation activities. Individual capability is what matters in operational situations, and she's demonstrated that capability consistently." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, covering topics that extended far beyond the original fitness challenge. Participants explored questions about military culture, the role of physical standards in personnel selection, and the importance of evidence-based decision-making in policy development. As the evening progressed and personnel began leaving the cafeteria for their quarters, Sarah reflected on the significance of the day's events. The fitness demonstration had achieved its immediate objective of validating her capabilities in direct comparison with her critics, but the broader impact would depend on how the results influenced future attitudes and policies. The following morning brought news that the demonstration had attracted attention from senior leadership throughout the Navy Special Operations community. The official results had been forwarded through command channels, and requests for additional information about training standards and performance metrics had begun arriving from various headquarters elements. Commander Williams briefed Sarah on the broader interest that had developed overnight, explaining that her performance had become part of ongoing discussions about women's integration into special operations roles. The concrete data from the fitness demonstration was being used to inform policy discussions at levels far above the base command structure. Your performance yesterday has provided valuable data for decision-makers who are evaluating the effectiveness of current integration policies, Williams explained during their private meeting. The results speak to individual capability in ways that theoretical discussions cannot. Sarah understood that her actions had implications beyond her personal situation, but she remained focused on her primary responsibility of performing effectively as a member of her SEAL team. The attention and recognition were gratifying, but they could not become distractions from her operational duties and continued professional development. The weeks that followed brought gradual changes in attitudes and interactions throughout Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Personnel who had harbored doubts about women's capabilities in special operations roles found those doubts challenged by concrete evidence of superior performance. The demonstration had provided a reference point for future discussions that was based on facts rather than assumptions or stereotypes. Chief Harrison became an unexpected advocate for evidence-based evaluation of individual capabilities, frequently referencing the fitness demonstration when colleagues expressed skepticism about gender integration policies. His transformation from critic to supporter provided a powerful example of how personal experience could override preconceived notions. Lieutenant Thompson used the experience as a learning opportunity about the importance of questioning assumptions and seeking factual information before forming opinions about complex policy issues. His participation in both the original criticism and the subsequent demonstration gave him unique perspective on the challenges of changing established attitudes within military culture. The broader impact of the cafeteria incident and fitness demonstration extended throughout the Navy Special Operations community, influencing discussions about training standards, performance evaluation, and integration policies. Sarah's exceptional performance had provided concrete evidence that individual capability could exceed gender-based expectations and stereotypes. As Sarah prepared for her upcoming operational deployment, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not only proven her personal capabilities, but had also contributed to broader progress in military culture and policy. The challenges ahead would be different from those she had already faced, but the foundation of respect and credibility established through her performance would serve her well in future endeavors. The incident that began with casual criticism in a base cafeteria had evolved into a defining moment that would influence military culture and policy for years to come. Sarah Chen's response to skepticism had not only validated her own capabilities, but had also opened doors for future women who would seek to serve in roles that demanded the highest levels of physical and mental capability. Her story would be told and retold throughout the military community, serving as an example of how individual excellence could overcome institutional barriers and cultural resistance. The female SEAL's response had indeed stunned the entire cafeteria, but more importantly, it had changed minds and opened possibilities that would benefit countless others who would follow in her footsteps.